The disappearance of Monique Washington was a very intriguing case for a profiler. At first, there was no evidence of foul play, no clear indication of a struggle. It appeared that she had just vanished.
On a quiet fall day in Florida's capital city, a young woman disappears.
Monique had recently moved from a small community to a larger city. Perhaps she was unaware of the dangers she might find there.
An empty apartment, a missing car. Investigators can only guess what happened to Monique Washington.
As I got deeper into this case, I began to fear the worst.
Tallahassee, Florida. A bustling city of government buildings and university students. For 18-year-old Monique Washington, who has just moved here from rural Wakulla County, it's a chance to do something with her life.
She wanted to attend junior college, and that made me very happy.
Monique is in the process of moving from one apartment in the city to another, and she's kept her mother updated on how the move is going. Then, the calls suddenly stop.
She would call me every day. When I didn't hear from her, I became worried.
Monique's mother decides to drive the 20 miles to her daughter's old apartment in the city.
I knocked on the door and there was no answer.
She also notices that Monique's new car isn't parked in its usual space.
I was thinking she probably riding, being a typical young woman, just riding her new car.
But when several days pass without any word from Monique, she contacts the Leon County Sheriff's Office to report her daughter as a missing person.
Police and fire, can I help you?
Soon after the call from Monique's mother, Sheriff's Detective Tony Dreswicki is assigned to investigate the young woman's disappearance.
I got the call about a missing persons case involving Monique Washington. I started my investigation at her old apartment, where friends had told us this was the last place they knew her to be going.
Dreswicki notices that her new car is still missing, along with a few items she told friends she was coming to pick up.
She was coming to get her TV, she was coming to get her VCR. And these were the most expensive belongings in the apartment, so it would be natural that she would take those with her. The belongings were not in the apartment, and we had no idea where they were at.
The apartment is in a state of disarray, but that's to be expected during a move. Dreswicki finds no signs of violence.
It looked like, she was in the process of moving out. There was some disassembled furniture, some piled up clothes, but still nothing that really said, that something was wrong.
Though it's not unusual for a young person to take off with a car and a few expensive personal items, Detective Dreswicki doesn't think Monique Washington fits that profile.
We didn't know what had happened to her, so for me, I was concerned about her safety, and for us, time was critical.
Investigators run a missing persons report in the local newspaper and on TV, hoping someone might have seen Monique. But there's no response from the public. 2 weeks pass before investigators get their first lead.
The Tallahassee Police Department contacted the Leon County Sheriff's Office and said that they had received a complaint about a vehicle being parked in front of a townhouse for several days. It came back that indeed this was Monique Washington's vehicle.
There are no signs of Monique, but police do find something that puzzles them.
We observed that there was also a parking stub from Atlanta on the dashboard. And that would definitely be unusual for Monique to take her vehicle to Atlanta.
Investigators question why Monique would make the 10-hour round trip to Atlanta and then park her car far away from either of her apartments. With time running out, they decide to contact criminal profiler Dale Hinman.
Profilers are trained to interpret clues that other people might not find to be significant, and sometimes the behavioral clues can be just as important as physical evidence.
When Hinman looks at the photos from Monique Washington's old apartment, she's looking for details someone else might have missed. And she finds one.
After looking at the photos of Monique's apartment, we realized that only one shoe was present. We had to wonder how or why Monique left the apartment wearing only one shoe. At that point, I feared the worst.
Then, a short time later, the case takes the turn Hinman has feared all along. The remains of a woman are discovered hidden in a stand of mangroves, not too far from where Monique Washington had grown up. Forensic dentist Marcy Beck is called in to identify the body.
In this case, the body was so decomposed that there was no way to make an identification, so it was necessary to make the identification based on dental records. This x-ray was taken while Monique was alive, and on the right we have an x-ray that was taken from the skeletal remains. You can see how identical the two x-rays look. It was an exact comparison. There was no doubt in my mind.
Monique's mother had always held out hope that her daughter was still alive, until now.
I felt like someone had kicked me, you know, in my stomach. When they told me they found her, all I could do is just cry.
While the search to find Monique has ended exactly as Agent Hinman predicted, the hunt for her killer has just begun. Hinman hopes the site where Monique's body was found will provide some clues about the killer who chose it.
You see, the body was found back in here in this wooded area. This is an actual map of the area.
Detective Dreswicki and Sheriff Sergeant Annie White accompany Hinman back to the swamp.
This is the location where the body was actually found. As you can see, there's no main roads really coming in here.
Seems to me like the killer might have known or had been previously in this area to be able to find this location.
It's definitely off the beaten path. Let me show you here exactly where the body was down here.
Could the killer be someone from this area? Maybe even someone Monique knew from her rural hometown? Hinman needs to see more.
It's actually down this hill here. You keep going, it goes downhill quite a bit.
Here you go.
Okay.
This is the area here where the body was located. As you can see, the water. We did locate some personal effects at the body.
And then this was a shoe that was found, which is connected to Monique.
Wasn't the other half of this set of shoes back at the victim's apartment?
Yeah, that's the same shoe.
The missing shoe confirms Hinman's earlier theory that Monique was probably dragged or carried out of her apartment. But that's not all Hinman can deduce from this scene.
There's a good chance that when the body was left here, there was actually water in the area, so at some point she may have been underwater. Well, that's a further attempt on the part of the offender to conceal the body.
Yeah.
A body submerged in water decays much faster than on land. Hinman believes this is what the killer wanted.
Bringing her all the way to this location and putting her in an area like this, there was a good possibility that her body would never have been found.
I think you're absolutely right, because it was almost 30 days between the time she was reported missing and the body was actually recovered.
Well, this gives the offender the opportunity to use the victim's car and to get rid of any of her personal property, and these are the actions that we would expect from an individual who knew this victim.
Hinman has seen this type of behavior before. Killers who go to great lengths to conceal their crime often have a personal connection to the victim, and she suspects that Monique Washington was murdered for the most basic of motives, her new car. Hinman believes the killer carefully hid Monique's body in order to buy time to use her vehicle, and the location where it was found provides even more answers.
This is the location where the victim's vehicle was recovered. The car was parked backed in right at this location at the end space. And in Florida, we don't have vehicle tags on the fronts of our vehicles, so essentially if someone was looking for that vehicle based on the description in the tag, you know, it might have been a long time before this vehicle was noticed in the area. the individual could come back and use this car over and over again, without raising any type of suspicion in this area.
For Hinman, the place the car was found also suggests something else.
So with the leaving of the vehicle in this area, it made us all think that possibly the offender had some connection to this area so they could keep an eye on the vehicle and return to it whenever they wanted to.
Hinman is convinced the location of the car is what's important. The killer is most likely from this neighborhood, not someone from Monique's hometown. What she wants to know now is if anyone who lives or works nearby can be tied to Monique. And the answer is yes. After Monique moved to Tallahassee, she befriended brothers Elvis and David Francis, along with their roommate Tamika Jones, and their apartment lies just blocks away from where Monique's car was found.
They were friends of hers. She had known them for, 2 or 3 months before her disappearance. Monique was new to Tallahassee, and these were some new friends that she met when she moved to Tallahassee.
But when investigators interview them, all three give the same story.
They basically said that the last time they saw her was the Friday before her disappearance. They said that Monique had given them a ride up to the local supermarket to cash a check, and that they had made plans to go out the next night, but they never saw her again.
Since there's no reason to doubt their story, investigators turn their attention to Monique's small-town past. Could Agent Hinman have been wrong about the hometown connection? Detectives soon learned that Monique had an ex-boyfriend who lived only a few miles away from where her body was found.
I had been told by a friend of Monique's that she may have had a stormy relationship at one point with the ex-boyfriend.
Reginald Williams and Monique Washington had dated at Wakulla High School, but their breakup had left Williams so bitter and angry, Monique had considered getting a restraining order against him.
Statistically, there's a high percentage of females who are killed by their boyfriends or their husbands, so we had to consider him as a possible suspect.
Coming up next, could a lover's quarrel have led to Monique's disappearance and death? After Monique Washington is found dead in a remote swamp, investigators turn their attention to a potential suspect from her small-town past, her ex-boyfriend, Reginald Williams.
Given Monique and Reginald's violent relationship, it was easy to consider him as a suspect in this case. But that didn't explain why the car was discovered in Tallahassee. We needed to be looking for someone who lived in the area where the car was found and was connected to Monique.
Hinman's reasoning is simple. If Williams had wanted to use Monique's car, he wouldn't have parked it so far from his own home in the country. So she's not surprised to learn that Reginald Williams has an airtight alibi.
He was able to provide alibis about his locations that we were able to confirm the last time he had seen her, and we felt very confident that he probably was not involved in this disappearance and murder.
Once again, the case seems in danger of stalling. Hinman points detectives back to the original profile. Look for someone who knew Monique and lived in the area where her car was found.
We all thought the killer was someone who had a connection not only to the victim, but to the location where the car was discovered. And the suspects who best matched this criteria were Tamika and the Francis brothers.
Investigators go back for a closer look at David and Elvis Francis and their roommate Tamika Jones. And this time, there are gaps in their recollections.
The second time I interviewed them, I felt some deception from them. All of a sudden, their story wasn't as clear as they led us to believe. For me, that was a red flag.
But Detective Dreswicki knows that a red flag isn't proof.
When we look at all the evidence in their statements, although they're suspicious, it's not enough for an arrest warrant. It's not enough to hold them.
Then suddenly, events hundreds of miles away give police the break they need. On a routine traffic stop, officers outside of Atlanta, Georgia, pull over a stolen vehicle. The occupants are brothers David and Elvis Francis. And when police run the vehicle's tags through their databanks, they learn the car's owner has been murdered.
Police made an arrest today in the murder of Orlando resident Helena Mills. Brothers David and Elvis Francis were caught driving her stolen car outside of Atlanta, Georgia.
The brothers are charged in the murder of Helena Mills. But does that mean they're also responsible for the death of Monique Washington?
I was not surprised. I had felt that they were not telling us everything about Monique Washington's case, and when I found out they were in jail in Orlando, it confirmed that they were capable of such a heinous crime of murder.
Agent Hinman is convinced the Francis brothers, along with their roommate Tamika Jones, are also responsible for the murder of Monique Washington. But with no physical evidence linking them to the crime, a confession seems like the only alternative, and Hinman has a strategy in mind to get one.
Does Tamika have a criminal history?
She has some petty crimes, but nothing that resulted in a prison sentence.
So she really doesn't have any experience in terms of dealing with the police on a regular basis, in terms of how she would develop a strategy for hiding the truth from you?
I don't believe so.
Agent Hinman thinks this could work to the investigators' advantage.
Because Tamika is separated from the Francis brothers, she can't verify with them what they're telling you as part of the investigation. She's more likely to confess than the two of these individuals because they're in the system and they've bonded with each other and they have their stories together. I think she's the weakest link in this case and the person who would be more likely to confess to you her involvement in this crime.
Coming up, will Tamika Jones crack under pressure? After their arrest for another murder in Orlando, brothers Elvis and David Francis are prime suspects in the Tallahassee slaying of Monique Washington. Profiler Dale Hinman is sure that roommate Tamika Jones is the best hope for a confession.
We saw Tamika Jones as the weak link in this case. We knew she was involved, but she was separated from the brothers and she was criminally inexperienced. If she could be convinced that we knew what had happened, perhaps she would confess.
Detective Dreswicki puts the strategy to work. And after hours of intense questioning, Tamika begins to reveal the truth of what happened that day.
Tamika told us that the day Monique was murdered, that she had stopped by David and Elvis's apartment and asked for help moving her TV and her VCR, and that Elvis and Tamika agreed to help her move those items.
But as Tamika's audio-taped confession reveals, help isn't what they gave Monique.
When we got to her house, she went outside to open her trunk door. She came back in, Elvis was standing behind the door. He had grabbed her from the back of her neck, threw her on the ground, and just started choking her. And he took like the VCR cord, he put it around her neck and was holding it real tight that she stopped breathing.
And what did you do while he was choking her?
I didn't do nothing, just stood right there and watched the whole thing.
And Elvis got his brother to go back to Monique's apartment and help him load up the body and ultimately dispose of it.
It's exactly the course of events Agent Hinman had pieced together months ago, right down to the motive.
Apparently the motive in Monique's murder was her vehicle. David, Elvis, and Tamika wanted her vehicle, and Elvis and Tamika killed her for it.
For Monique's mother, justice is bittersweet.
That's not going to bring her back. They can see their parents. I can't see Monique. I just have memories.
Tamika Jones and Elvis Francis are both convicted of third-degree murder for the death of Monique Washington. Elvis is also convicted of first-degree murder in the death of Helena Mills. His brother David Francis is still awaiting trial for both cases.
Monique Washington was from a small, close-knit family, and she grew up in a little country town. How could she have possibly known that her new friends would turn out to be her worst enemies? The killers went to great lengths to conceal their identity and try to throw the detectives off their trail, but all the evidence was still there. It's our job to work together to follow these clues to uncover the truth for Monique and her family.